Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another fabulous and exciting episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show. I am Anna Banks, your host, and today's episode, titled Entrepreneurial Lessons from the Social Justice Frontiers, is featuring none other than Lori James Town, and she is the president of Expand Now LLC and the executive director of the National Association for Public Defense.
Yeah.
Now, Lori brings a wealth of experience from her roles in social work and leadership within the criminal justice system, and she will share her journey, insights on overcoming entrepreneurial challenges, and strategies for building effective teams and creating meaningful community impact. So, all I can say is get ready for an inspiring conversation packed with some practical advice and some valuable lessons. And I dare say some things for you to think on, um, that every entrepreneur can do for themselves as well as for their community. So, welcome to the Urban Entrepreneur Show, Lori.
Thank you so much, Anna. I've been really waiting for this day. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for seeing enough in my journey to invite me to be a guest on your esteemed show.
Well, look, I'm always looking to make sure that I bring the best from different fronts. We have so many talented people across this country that
Yes.
people don't get a chance to actually see. And so my job is to find those diamonds in the rough that are doing some absolutely fabulous work in their community, in their business, in their industry, and to spotlight them so that others will be not only inspired, but motivated to take action.
Yes.
So, Laura, you have a very interesting background.
Yeah.
So, how does your background in social work shape your approach to leadership in the criminal justice system? I mean, you're really going to have to help us with that.
Well, that's a good question to start off with, and so I thank you for that particular question. It is one of those stories where I feel like everything that I went through has prepared me for right now, right, for this
Mhm.
day, for this time in my life. I started, well, as a child, I grew up in an urban community, right? Like that's where we first lived, in urban community. My humble beginnings started in East Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I am, outside of Baltimore now. And then before moving to a county area of Maryland, just being exposed to all of those things, right? And not only being exposed to those things in our neighborhood, but being exposed to the criminal legal system up close and personal. And Anna, we talked about this with my father being a person who spent most of his adult life in and out of prison, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, and so it should have not surprised anyone, but it did surprise me when I went to Morgan State University and majored in social work and really became attached to my first leadership mentor, who is my social work professor. And what he taught me, Anna, was lessons in leadership that I take with me just naturally. I realize as I get older, the things that were implanted in me, and when our grandmothers talked about planting seeds, and
Yes.
and we were like, okay, and didn't really listen. Like now, I absolutely know what all of that means, right? And so he planted a seed. He planted a seed in two passions in my life. One was the criminal legal system and helping folks who were impacted by the criminal legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And the second was leadership, because he was the type of instructor that would take you by the hand and show you, right? If you had an interest, he was going to show you. If you had a passion, he was going to make an opportunity for you. And so he took me to the Baltimore City Pre-Release Center when I was a freshman at Morgan, and I was able to work very closely with the men who were set to be released. And I learned so much from them. I gleaned so much from them. I learned about taking responsibility for behaviors. I learned about having remorse. I learned about the impact of poverty. I learned about the impact of not being there to be with your families. And they were also just very caring towards me because I was young. They were older. So they would teach me life lessons or ask me questions like, how are you going to handle this? Or what you going to do about that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I learned humanity and people that in a group of people that most folks would turn their back on or say that they didn't deserve to come home or they didn't deserve our programs or what have you. But that is where, and I learned forgiveness for the things that
Mm.
my father did through working with that population. And so it really goes that far back in terms of my social work roots, and understanding that I wanted to be the type of leader, the type of teacher that Mr. Wesson, who was my professor, was for me.
Well, I don't know if he's still alive.
Oh, we just funeralized him about 6 months ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, he saw the seed that he planted blossom into such a beautiful, beautiful flower. I know that that's part of the pay for
yes.
most professors and teachers when they can see the students that they've
Hmm.
poured into,
Yes,
really take on life and do some remarkable things. Like my father would say, your chest puffs up and you just say, like, I helped with that. I didn't do it, but I
that's right.
helped. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
so good on him. Thank you for sharing that, because there seemed to be almost like a disconnect, like social work and criminal justice.
That's right.
It probably isn't, but because I guess people who have been through this criminal justice system do need someone that's going to have if nothing more, a sympathetic ear and a program or some strategies to help them to correct the ills that have even that they've perpetrated themselves or that have happened to them. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social workers are particularly perfect for this population because the first thing we're taught is to understand the person within their environment. And
mm,
so we see the whole person. And so when we're able to describe to the courts or to probation officers or judges or what have you, we're able to see the whole person and how the environment may have impacted them. And also, like you said, what they might need to be successful in the future. And so I absolutely found my passion in that work.
well, like I said, I so appreciate it, and I appreciate the diversity of the skills in which you've used in doing this work.
Yeah.
So you're still, I mentioned earlier that not only do you have your own business, but you're also an executive director of
Yes.
a very powerful um, public defense organization. And
Yes.
so as a entrepreneur though, what has been a personal challenge that you've experienced? Because the people who are listening to the Urban Entrepreneur Show are often um, entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs. And I've often said being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart.
That's right. That's right. And so I appreciate you bringing those two together because I really do realize that although I have this position, this national position of running this organization, the National Association for Public Defense, which has over 28,000 members from across the country, from every state in the country, mostly made of attorneys. And by me not being an attorney, and being one of the only non-attorneys leading a legal organization, nonprofit organization, that my skill set in building business and my skill set in working with people is transferring to that particular position. And
Mhm.
so the question about the challenge, I thought about that, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to share with folks who are with us this evening. The first one is the first one, I'm gonna go back before I went to the National Association for Public Defense, and I want to talk about a journey that you probably a little bit familiar with, although we've never discussed it. When I was working in a leadership position, a statewide leadership position, I realized that my natural leadership abilities were only going to take me so far, right?
Mhm.
And that I needed to do something to grow so that I can continue to pour into the people that I was leading, right? Like having great conversations or creating a program, right? That's great, but it wasn't helping me. It wasn't increasing my leadership IQ,
Right.
right? And so I always loved John Maxwell books. Always, always, always. I loved one, I loved the spirituality piece in it and in some of his books, the fellowship part, but I also love that it just makes sense. And I love that it's universal and you could share it across the world and people get it, right? And you and I see that all the time. So I decided that this is what I want to do. Like, I want to go to this training. Like, I want to do something that's going to pour into me and make me better so that I can be a better leader. Right. And so my job wouldn't pay for it. And it wasn't cheap. It wasn't cheap. And so, I wanted to take it. This is so walking out on faith. I wanted to take the training so that I could develop training in my job. I wanted to develop people right where I was. I didn't have a vision for Expand Now. I literally just wanted to pour into the public defender community, and that's what I wanted to do. And they said, "No, we're not paying for that." There was a lot
Mhm.
of discussion. And so I couldn't afford it, and I was like, "What are you going to do? Like, this is what you need. This is what you need even though you can't afford it." So I got a credit card, a, a an airline credit card, put it on there, and then use the miles to go to our training, our certification training, the Maxwell training. Right? It is by far one. I was devastated when that news came down that they wouldn't pay for it. I was livid,
Mhm.
and something said you cannot let this barrier be a barrier to your growth, right?
Mhm.
You cannot let this be a barrier to what is in your heart, which is to pour into other people and to add value to the folks who are doing this really, really hard work, right?
Yes.
Like, they're
Yes.
doing really hard work, right? And so even though it was my own pocket investment, I did it, right? And it was the first time, I'm pretty sure it's the first time that I invested in myself at that
Mhm.
level, right? If other than
Outside
my
of
house,
outside of your formal education.
outside of my formal education, and then post a house and a car, right? But it was
Mhm.
the first time that I was like, I'm doing this for me, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and I'm gonna bring it back anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway, right? And I'm gonna bring it back anyway, even though they didn't pay for it. I'm still gonna pour into my
Yes.
coworkers, right? Um, And so that was one. It was what continue to operate in my gifts and my faith, and knowing that whatever I had and whatever was poured into me, whatever God told me to do, I still had to be obedient and do it and find a way, right? And so that was my year. That was a shift for me, to be honest, Anna. Like, I'm sure you remember your first Maxwell training and just, I mean, wow, right? And I realized obedience is important, right? Um, the willingness to walk out on faith on things, and to really have faith in yourself as well, like that you could do this, and to be flexible and adaptable, and realize that you can make a way, right?
Mhm.
And so that's one that I wanted to share. Um, and then the second one is when I did go to NAPD as the executive director, and dealing with the not just other folks saying it, but me saying it myself. Like, you can't do this, right? You can't lead an
Mm,
organization of lawyers. Like, they don't want you in this position, you know? And then, to be honest and transparent, part of the application process was a questionnaire, and it was a 30 some page questionnaire. And I looked at it and I started working on it, took weeks to do. And despite the fact that sometimes folks put, and I'm not acute, I'm just saying sometimes people put things out there hoping to exclude. And we've all done it when we have hiring. There's always a process. When we pledge our sorority, there's a process, right? You have to be able to make a decision and make a cut somehow. So even though this tool is developed to make a cut, it was a tool that confirmed for me, because
mm-hmm.
every question, I was like, oh, I can do this job. Oh, I am prepared for this job. Oh, my steps have been ordered for this job, right? And so the piece of advice that I would give in terms of looking at challenges and making them opportunities. The other thing is, I've said to myself plenty of times, if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Why not
Somebody's
you?
gonna do it.
Someone's going to do it. Why not you? Right. And you want to, and you'll probably be good at it. And if you're not good at it, I'm the type of person who will find the people to help me be better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I would, again, walk in your purpose, walk in your faith, do it afraid, do it anyway, would be the talk to folks. I talk to a lot of my inner circle. Um, a lot of my many members of my inner circle were like, I don't understand. This is perfect for you. You can do this. um, I told my board last week, maybe the president of the board, because she was talking to me. She's an amazing woman, and she said, like, I'm impressed by the way that you've grown this organization and what motivates you. And I remember the press release, and the previous president said, um, one of the things that we learned during this process is that everything that Lori touches, she makes better. And he didn't know me very well. He learned this through the interviews. He learned it through the reference checks. He learned it through my written response to this ridiculous 30 questionnaire. But that was confirming to me. And on really tough days within NAPD and other things that I do outside, I remember that quote, like this, and it, because I feel like that is a mantra of what guides me and what motivates me. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't do it independently, but I do feel like I try my best to make things better.
That is great. Yeah, challenges can make or break so many of us, and so what I hear you talking about is, what Simon Sinek has memorialized in his book. No, you have to know why. You
That's
have
right.
to know. You have to know that. So you need to start with why, and that's what you did. And so that's so good. That's so good.
Thank
So,
you.
what advice would you offer to urban entrepreneurs that are aiming to create meaningful change in their communities?
Yeah. So, first of all, remember why you're doing it. Because if you're working in the space in which, like, I work in, with people who um, others feel like their lives have no value, right? You're going to run across naysayers. If you're working with the homeless population, if you're working even with people who are mentally ill, if you're working in clinics with women, right? During this day and age, and we all know what's happening with women not being able to make their choices. If that is where you are, you're gonna run up against people who say, how could you? How could you do that job? How could you care about this? We're not going to give you money for this population. We're not going to, no, you don't get the grant. You don't get the grant to help inner city squeegee kid boys on the corner of Baltimore City. You don't get the money to help victims, victims of poverty, right? And so, because everybody has an opportunity, is what the naysayers will say. And if they're poor, that's because they want to be poor. If they're whatever, that's because. So I would say, remember what you came there for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or came here for. Um, Remember that you are uniquely qualified for that, right? I would also say, don't do it alone. Like, I feel like we want to do it, and sometimes we want to, like, hold it and have the credit, right? But the best programs are partners, having
Yes.
allies that you can, right? And I like to tell folks, especially my public defender community, is who are your unlikely allies, right? Who are your unlikely allies? When I did death penalty work and I testified on death penalty cases across the country, sometimes we needed NOMNI because NOMNI would tell us and maybe write a letter for our client that says mental illness should not be executed.
Okay, so what is NOMNI? You're using
Yeah, oh
acronyms.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. And I hope I get it right. And somebody could help me in the audience, but the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, I believe.
Okay.
All right. And so they're a national, international, maybe advocacy group for people who suffer from mental illness, right? And if we had clients that suffered, sometimes we needed their education, we needed their voice, right? They're unlikely allies. They never had to come to court. They never, they didn't have to
Mhm.
touch the case or the client, but just having their backing or having their expertise in that space, unlikely allies. So I'm a firm believer in unlikely allies as well, and a strong believer in understanding that sometimes we have to make the sacrifices to get to where we need to be, right? And to know the road might be hard, particularly if you're trying to change communities, right? Particularly if you're trying to change hearts and mindsets at the same time. And then the other thing that I would say is, just like we talked about earlier, is growing while you're growing, right? Growing while you're growing. So what is it that I need to do to grow? What is it that I need to know that I don't know? Don't go into neighborhoods thinking you're the expert, because we, especially when we get all of our education, right? We go into these communities and we think
Oh
we
yeah.
know it all. Yes, yes. Um, and if I could just tell a brief anecdote of that, there was once a case that we were working on in East Baltimore, and it was riddled with crime, right? And that was part of what we wanted to tell the story of. And our client was very young. I think he was like 18, involved in a very serious case. And so we started looking, and somehow we ran across some data from the CDC, and we reached out to the researchers and we were like, we see that you wrote all these reports about this crime in this neighborhood. And the CDC analysts said, and researchers said, during our meeting, they said, we wanted to write about HIV and AIDS. We got all this money from from the government to write and to study, and we went to the community, and we had rolled out listening groups, and we had gave out pamphlets, and the people came to the community center and they were like, we know that we have an issue in the Baltimore with this. They were like, but the thing that's riddling our community is crime. And so that's how they ended up writing this entire journal article with from the pediatric journal about crime in the neighborhood that we were studying, right? And so again, I praise them for making that shift. But sometimes we go into communities and we have we have a hypothesis that we want to prove, and we fail to listen to the folks who are proximate to the issue, who know the issue better than we do, and who could literally be our experts.
Yes.
So yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's really that's brilliant because I know in not just neighborhoods, but governments and municipalities and whatnot, they'll sit in their chambers, and even though they're supposed to be from the community, many of
yes,
them are not. They
that's
may
right.
well have an address there,
Yes,
but there's nothing that they really do there.
that's right.
And then they're well spoken, well educated, and so in many, especially in diverse communities, people who have the education are usually the ones that are pushed forward, and they don't listen. They
That's right.
really don't listen to really what's going on.
That's right.
um, and it's sad. It's sad because then they develop programs and they do all of this stuff, and it has no impact. Totally impotent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I really liked. I wrote that down. Unlikely allies. Because I'm getting ready to do some work myself, and I need to look at some
Yeah,
unlikely allies, to get this work done in this community. So thank you for that. Yeah, like I'm always looking and wanting to learn.
that's right.
And that's one of the things, like you said, growing while you're growing.
That's right. That's right. Always. You got I heard you say on one of your other podcasts that you are a lifelong learner. And
Yeah,
I think that as leaders we have to be, how can we not be, right? Like we have to be intentional about our growth, right? Like we just can't go day to day hoping that we grow, right? Like, and I tell people, like, if that was the case, all of the lessons that our mothers told us, we wouldn't have done them. We did them anyway, right? All the things that mom said don't do, we were like, oh, I'm going to try it anyway,
oh yeah,
right?
they don't know what they're talking about.
They don't know what they're talking about. And so lessons learned are not growing, right? So we have to make intentional space for growth and create space for others to intentionally grow as well. I should definitely say that out here. Like we have to create space for others to grow, and we have to be okay with that. I think that some leaders, uh, and I know that I've been subjected to this with leaders, that they see your light and they want to try to shut it down, right? And when we see people's light, we have to make space for theirs to shine bright, just like ours, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I look, I you you, you got my vote on that one.
Well, that's what you're doing right now by having the podcast.
Yeah. So, Lori, how do you effectively tailor your consulting
Yeah,
to meet the needs and the challenges of these different businesses? And what strategies do you use to ensure that you have an impact in the outcomes across not only the entrepreneurial area, but also in the nonprofit legal area?
sure. So I think that um, this is where social work really helps. Not only social work, but ministry, like being in ministry helps, is to first talk to folks and find out what it is that you need. I always start consultations with, what is it that you're looking to get out of this? Even if someone asks me to be a keynote speaker,
Mhm,
what is it that you want from the address, right?
mhm.
What are you hoping to move? How are you hoping to move the audience? And I think that also comes from me being an expert witness on the stand for so many years, prepping my testimony. What do you want the judge to hear when I sit down off of this bench, or to come off the witness stand? What do you want to be left? What do you want the listeners to be left with? So that is one of the things that I really do embody and work with my team to embody as well, is listening, planning, and really being intentional around what it is that they need. And I dare say, and I know it's extra work, but I don't do cookie cutter programs, right? I mean, yeah, a morning might look like a morning, but the afternoon will not look like the afternoon, like, or mix it up a little bit. There will be multiple things in a program, or within a relationship that we have, or even if it's a long-term project like a strategic planning or a program development. Yours is not going to look like another organization that I work with, because yours has to be tailored to you, to your needs, to your community, to your team, right? And so, again, at you yourself, being a consultant, and being a businesswoman, that puts an extra burden on us, but I think it's worth it, and I think it's what makes me who I am, right? To be able to do that. And then I look for, even in the engagement process, I look for a shift in language. Like, we would never to, oh, there, it's possible, you know.
Mhm.
um I look for more we's than I, think, just as an example, right? I look for smiles when people come together, right? I know you work with team when they come together, no one in the room is smiling, right?
Child, not only not smiling, but arms crossed.
Arms crossed. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Like, why am I here?
That's
You know,
right.
yes.
That's right. And then I might point it out, right? Like, did you notice a shift? Have you noticed a change, right? Over time. I also look to see if folks are enriched in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I look for excitement and inspiration in the process too. Right? That gives me energy. Like is that makes me so excited when I see teams, when you're like, go to the board and write something, and they like jump up and they got their markers, and you're just like,
Mm-hmm. I
yes, this is
know, I
great.
know, I
This is
know.
great. Yes. And so have you shifted mindsets, right? During the break, are people coming up to you and saying, uh, I've never thought about it like that, or you've given me something to think about, right? In the post evaluation, if it's a longer engagement, are people saying that? Um, and are they seeing value in whatever the engagement is, right? Do they see value in it? And what you have provided, what we have provided, and then also making sure that we understand
Yes.
who's benefiting from this, right? Keeping that front and centered. So, of course, like in public defense, we want our clients and our communities to benefit. But if leaders are being trained, I need leaders to benefit so that they can then lead others. That will then trickle down all the way to the not all the way, but over to the client,
Mm-hmm.
right? Over to the community. And the same thing in my consulting. I wanted to trickle through the team. I wanted to trickle through whoever their service, because many of my the work that I do is with small nonprofits. I wanted to trickle into the communities that they're serving as
Mm-hmm.
well. And then I would say the other thing that is impactful is the work that we are doing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Right, I have an amazing person that works with me with NAPD who I'm so excited to have her on my team because um, just by having her there, it shows that we think that this is important,
Yes.
right? That we value this. And there's not many programs anymore that I will do that won't talk about that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the thing that as a team you need to conquer, right? That you need to have, I call them brave conversations,
Mm-hmm.
that you need to have these brave conversations, right? And then Anna, the other thing is I think that one of the spaces that I've come very comfortable operating in is having these conversations about cultural collisions, what I
Mm.
call cultural collisions, right? Like I want all the leaders to kind of lean in on that, like read about it, create space to connect with folks on it, because it's not it's not just about race, it's not just about ethnicity, it's sometimes just that folks don't know how to have these difficult, brave conversations, and they don't have the same history, they don't have the same understanding. And how do we create a space where folks can come and ask questions and be curious,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes, as Ted Lasso says, be curious, and then really create a safer space, because sometimes it's never safe, right? But a safer space to have that, and also to know that it may not fix the problem, right? Like, because some people want to have the conversations with you because they want to just feel better, right? Like, I know that there was a
Mm-hmm.
microaggression that was shared, and if I can just talk to you about it, you'll feel better. No, may not work, but at least I know you thought about it, and maybe you won't do it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
take away the hurt. So I think all creating those spaces for the folks that I work with, um, all the way around in my space, become extremely important to me.
That is incredible. I love the way that you've um, integrated all of your learnings and teachings and experiences into, I can't just say a program, but a framework almost that
Yes.
allows you to move in and out of spaces bravely,
Yes.
and also cast permission for
Yes.
others to be able to do so, because many times we just don't know.
That's right.
Like I can remember, as a I won't say I wasn't a child, I was probably a teenager, and I met this one little young lady, and she wanted to know why my lips were brown rather than pink.
That's right.
And so when I explained it to her, she said, "Oh, now her mom was almost mortified. But see, that was the innocence of a child being curious."
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And so, that those kind of things make a difference. And when you have leaders that can set those context for people to be able to ask those questions, because sometimes we just don't know.
That's right. That's
Just
right.
don't know. And
That's
you
right.
don't want to keep hearing things from this person, that person, or what somebody else said, or God forbid it be something on the news that is like 99% wrong half the time.
That's
But
right. That's right.
you know what I'm saying? As I mentioned to you before, you remind me, I mean, like your, not remind me, but your work and your passion for social justice is reminds me of my dear friend Letty Johnson. I mean, she is like Miss Social Justice in Kentucky.
Oh, okay, Letty, we gotta connect.
Yes, yes, yes. I don't care if it's public transportation or school transportation or whatever it is. It's like, are we really being proactive in making sure that everybody gets, like a fair treatment on that? Are we really looking at the situation? Do people really have a sense of belonging? It's not just DEI anymore, but
That's
you
right,
know what
with
I'm
the
saying?
B. That's right.
Yes. And so, all of those things really help to make our, not only ourselves and our families, but our communities so much stronger. We
That's right.
truly are better together. We're
That's right.
truly better together rather than through all of these defenses and these, all of that stuff. So
Absolutely.
I'm just loving this conversation.
Me too.
So, what are some of your key principles and best practices that you've learned in your work, not only in social work, but also, working with with the nonprofit organization?
Mhm.
What are some of those things that can be applied to improve leadership, team dynamics, and organizational growth in other industries? I know
Sure.
that's a mouthful,
I
but
was
we have a we
we got some time. We could break it down a little bit. Okay.
yeah.
Yes. So, I think that some of the key principles that I've learned, I try to focus on folks' core values, right? Like to understand what are the core values in which we're operating in, right? And I do a lot of work with leaders on that, like understanding, leaning into their core values as well as the organizational core values, but understand that they're not always the same, right? And it doesn't mean that that's a problem necessarily. It just means that you need to understand that, like, who's on your team, who is on your leadership team, who's on your management team, and what's important to them, and how can you elevate not just their core values, but their gifts. So I totally believe
Mm.
in finding ways for people to operate in their gifts, Anna. Like, even if it's just a small, hopefully everyone is doing a job that they're operating in their gifts. But maybe, I mean, I once took a assessment at church and it said that one of my, like my number three was hospitality. And I never really thought that one of my gifts was hospitality. Like, I never wanted to be on the usher board. I never wanted to be on the catering committee at church or any. I never wanted to do any of that stuff, right? And so, but then I thought about it. I do like fellowship, right? Any kind of fellowship. Um, and so you will never be on my team where I'm not trying to gather people together to do something, right? And so is there a part of a part of your teammates or someone you're leading, or when you're teaching leadership, is there some way that we could tap into something that a person wants to do, that that is a gift of theirs, whether it's organizing some, whatever it might be, right? So I believe in allowing people to lean into their gifts. I also believe that it is important for teams to be collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
right? I believe in team development, obviously. I believe that you have to, again, make opportunities for people to grow. I also
Yes.
believe in some of the spaces that we've just talked about, especially in social justice, that we have to be willing to talk about the things that impact the folks even doing the work, right? So, if you have an organization where you have people who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system, right? What do you do? You can't just hire them and be like, oh, look, we have someone who, served time in prison and they're adding so much value, but what kind of value are you adding to them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And how are you supporting them? And do you understand what they're really bringing to the table? Um, I can say that in terms of leadership with women as well, and leaders of color, right? Understanding um, what it is that we face on a regular basis, particularly Black women, right? And really speaking truth to power in that, like, really, as a leader, I don't think it is our responsibility to make excuses or to downplay things that we know impact the people that we're serving.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, I really think we have to be bolder and better than that.
Yes.
And I think we even have to make the transitions in our teachings. And I'll give you an example. I like to talk about the um, the basic human needs in leadership training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That I think that leaders forget that the people that they lead are humans, and that if they don't make a living wage, if they don't have food, if they don't live in a safe neighborhood, um, if they have been assaulted, whatever the case may be, if they have secondary trauma from the work that they're doing, that as leaders, we need to be aware of that. And the reason that I started focusing on that is because I was doing a leadership training about 10 years ago. And one of the leaders said to the group, he was like, I'm not my brother's keeper. Like, I'm not responsible for them if they're hurting. And I was like, oh, but you are. You're not responsible for healing them,
Right.
but you're responsible for caring that they're hurting, right? Particularly if it's something that we did, particularly if it's an organizational hurt, particularly if it's a community hurt. And as you can imagine, in the criminal legal system, it's every day. For
It's
public
every day.
defenders,
It's
it's
every
every
day.
minute,
It's every
right?
day.
It is Black men, lawyers, and social workers walking into the courtroom, and the judge is saying to them, sit down and wait for your case to be called. And they have to say, oh, no, Your Honor, I'm an attorney. Or,
Mm-hmm.
no, Your Honor, I'm an interpreter. Or, whatever, right? And so that's hurt. And then you got to come back tomorrow and do the job again, right? So I started sharing this premise of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then George Floyd happened. And I was like, wait a minute. The basic human needs for people of color are different, right? That security level, that safety level. I mean, Sandra, Sonia,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't call the police when you feel like someone's breaking into your house without getting shot in your kitchen. Like, it's a different playing field, right? And so I had to shift it up a little bit and find non Maslow's ways of talking about the basic human needs, particularly when we're working in communities which are mostly poor people and people of color. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't always use the traditional methods. And I'm sure, so hopefully, some of your listeners, this will resonate with. I want them to think about, who are you working with? And does traditional textbooks, the traditional tools of learning, do you need to adapt them? Right. And so one of the things that I did in a recent training is I use snippets from Viola Davis's book, Finding Me. And I attribute her life to the different areas of basic human needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so I talk about the shift, because people are like, well, she made it, right? She's not like our clients. But there's a part in her book where she talks about overcoming the self-esteem stuff and the self-actualization part, right? And we know that people can't get to that level until they
That's
go
right.
through each of the processes, right? And so I try to take something real that people can understand and read parts of her book or show video clips of videos and get people to think about, right? Like, what was the shift for her? What was the shift for others? What was the shift for me and you? Right? What was the shift for me? Growing up in the projects in East Baltimore, watching my dad shoot my mother, and now being here, working with people who may have shot people as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can pinpoint the shift, and I want the leaders that I work with to help the people that they work with to pinpoint the shift, not just the shift for our clients, but the shift in for us as leaders. Like, what is the shift that you need to make that makes you a better leader? Do you
Yeah.
need to think about the time that you fuss someone out in public and never apologize? Do you need to think about the time when someone sent you a great idea and you stole it and said it was yours? Right? So,
Yeah. All right.
yeah.
Well, they say, come on now.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I have grown in that space to really work to engage my audiences, whether it is within NAPD or other areas, arenas, to think about the things that just make us human beings, that
Well,
just make us
and I
human.
think that's the piece that often we forget. We forget. As you were just talking, remind me of my uh how long was it? 19 weeks on grand jury.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That experience in my area
Yes.
was um, I was speechless
Mm-hmm.
half the time,
Yes.
because of some of the things, the presumptive things that they expected.
That's
You,
right.
and it's like, really? Yeah.
Yes. And people don't know that. They feel like when a jury gets a case from a grand jury, they're like, oh, he must or she must be guilty. They
Mm-mm.
don't even know that the defense doesn't get to talk in the
No,
grand jury
no,
process.
mm-mm,
So
not
that's
at
why I
all.
said proximity is so important, that people need to be aware. Like, we're living our privileged lives out here, right? But you are voting for judges, you are voting for city council members, you are maybe even campaigning for them, maybe even donating to them, and you don't know what they stand for, and you don't know the issues that are going to be before them, and we're passing, because we all are guilty,
Hmm.
passing judgment on populations and people that we have no proximity to.
Nope. Nope. I'm telling you. Like I said, oh wow. Woo, we could be on this show for a while. but but we're
We're
almost out of
almost
time
there.
for this one.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my goodness, Lori, this has been such a rich conversation. You
Thank you.
know, on the entrepreneurial lessons from social justice.
Yes.
We all have a responsibility,
Yeah.
and I love what you said when you pointed out to the gentleman that no, you are your brother's keeper.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're responsible to care that this other human being is hurt.
That's
You're
right.
not responsible for their healing. We
That's right.
all have to do our own work.
That's right.
We
That's
all
right.
have to do our own work. Ah, and the work doesn't stop.
It does not. It does not.
The work doesn't stop. And so, but I am so glad that, that we had this time together. This has been
Ew.
rich. This has been rich. It's been rich for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Me too.
And so, Lori, I appreciate the work that you're doing,
Thank you.
in your company, as well as, in your nonprofit. Um, it's work that definitely needs to be done, and with
Yes.
your 28,000 members,
Yes.
in the nonprofit, kudos to you,
Thank you.
for helping them to be better.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, wow. And so, my friends, as we wrap up this exciting episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show, I just want to again thank my special guest, Lori James Towns of Expand Now LLC, and also she's also the executive director for the National Association for Public Defense.
Yes.
You know, I tell you, sister is bad. I just love it. I just love it. Now, if you want to find out more about her and the work that she does, if you're looking for a speaker or something like that, that she might be able to add value to your organization, to your municipality, to your company. Um, this is one of the ways in which you can reach out to her. So go out and visit her website. It's expand-now.com. Expand-now.com. Thanks again, Lori, for all that you do. And my friends, again, as we wrap up another edition of the Urban Entrepreneur Show, I just want to thank our sponsor, Thrive Leadership Institute, your go-to source for coaching, training, and resources that will supercharge your personal and professional growth. But if you are an entrepreneur, have an exciting story to share, then consider joining us as a guest on the Urban Entrepreneur Show. You can find out more about the show and, reach out and up to, wait a minute, where's my numbers here? Oh Lord. Uh okay. I'm doing something wrong this time. There
There
it
we
is.
go.
The urbanentrepreneurshow.com, where you can sign up and find out, and also find out more about the show. And so, until the next time, thank you, Lori, for being with us, today. And,
Thank you.
look, I look forward to another go round.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
All right, then. So, until the next time, my friends, bye bye for now.
Bye.